Hey, it's Bootleg Mozart here. So, Dark Souls. You know how most bosses in Dark Souls are mostly just a guy in a suit of armor, a guy in a suit of armor, a guy in a suit of armor from the previous game, a girl in a suit of armor? Well, that's why I'm going to make Pokemon into Dark Souls bosses. After all, Pokemon stands for Pocket Monster, so they should reflect that. This is a series called PokeSouls, starting with the beginning of the decks, only using final evolutions, and moving on to the next. So you can see here I'm blotting in the colors. You could also see that I went ahead and had a lot of trouble getting the original design down. Tell you right now, this design with the colors is not going to stay because I wanted to show off more of the skull. So as you can see, we got some like gnarly barnacles in there. It's pretty cool looking, and I need to go and block out the rest of the colors of the Blastoise. So what really kind of made me struggle a lot with it were the little cannons that I had on there. I wasn't really sure what to do with them. I was debating on making them like skull cannons or something like that, but I'm like, I already have a skull on the back. I don't want to do too much with the skulls there. So I decided to make them tube worms. So that's what the little goopy things are on the inside of the cannons there. And over here, I'm just touching up a few more places and making it look a little bit more uniform, a little bit more sharp and clean. And I decided that I hated it, so I completely erased it. Uh, Over with this second design that I'm doing, I kind of wanted him to look a little bit more like Godzilla and a little less like a turtle because Godzilla is cool as fuck. And I also wanted to get that skull into like the main spotlight because I figured it would be pretty cool. And I got rid of like the pointy horns because if I gave him like the straight pointy horns, you probably wouldn't be able to see his face, and it's going to be really hard to see his face with the cannons anyway. So I did curved horns instead. We're doing a little bit of resizing, reshaping, and I remembered that he had a tail, and it would be kind of cool to have his tail come out of there, come out of the mouth, and have it look almost like a tongue. So I did that. We get onto some teethies, and I figured I'd just, pull the teeth out on the last few ones because his tail bashed him out or whatever, so he doesn't get scratchy with the teeth there. Going back with the tube worms, I have a little one coming out. I kind of want to remove that one, but I never actually did. And the main difference between Blastoise and Venusaur in my process here is that Venusaur didn't really look like a boss. He just kind of looked like a deformed Pokemon mass. And this guy, I'm giving him a couple of spears coming out of him. He's got, a harpoon. He's got harpoons coming out of him. And then, as usual, I got a little too into the details and gave him a bunch of chains to wrap around stuff and everything. And I redid his head because it didn't look enough like a turtle. I tried to give him hippo ears, but that didn't really work. But that was me. I gave him a hawkbill. I went off of a hawkbill to kind of hawkbill turtle for his face. I'm messing with his legs, and I messed with them a lot longer than I would like to, just because they were a little difficult. So I skipped over to the base color on everything, and I'm lining out all the colors for the teeth and the shell, and just you can see what I'm doing here. And after I get all those base colors down, I start cleaning up around the edges and making sure that everything looks all pretty nice and everything, and I get to work on the skull. So with the skull, I don't know what I'm doing with the jaw there. I don't know why I put a hole there. It does not look good. It looks like another eye, and it's just very, very bad. So I instead just work on the eyes, as you can see, and start doing my shading, my lighting, and I decided that after I put all this work into the shading already, that I just did not like how light everything was. I mean, this is Dark Souls, it's supposed to be a dark game, it has dark in the name, but I just couldn't get the colors to be right on that. That was also me. Um, So I start working with the eye sockets and trying to make them pop out a little bit. Then I move to the nose, and I don't know what I was doing with the shading on this nose, man. It was not a very good horn. It I didn't do the light source very well on that, I don't think. And then I move over to from the horn over to the other horns and start doing the spikes on the top of the head. Realize that I had lines there already and I could follow those lines instead of just winging it. So I did, and I started blotting out the colors and trying to get them to stick. And I kind of like how those little horns turned out. They look pretty good. And here you can see that I just redid the base coat because it was way too light and it was really hard to see any of the work that I was doing, so that's why I changed the color there. I go on and try to make these horns look a little bit nicer, a little bit more detailed, a little bit more shadowy, a little darker, and then I move on to his eye sockets again. And I'm trying to get those ridges in there. Those ridges are really, really rough, especially the lower ridges. I wasn't really sure how to do those, so I just ended up kind of having a ring around it. And I ended up putting these little notches on his horns because they look cool. I didn't like the single like color that I was doing there. It was a lot really, really bland. So I decided I would put in these notches because I can kind of do notches. And I think they look pretty good. I think the most proud part of this are the notches on the horns, I think. I don't know. I did the color pretty good on those. And then we move over to the schnoz. The hardest part of the schnoz was getting it to like stand out and show that it had depth and was raised and going over the second nostril hole. I really, in the end, I still couldn't really figure out how to do that too well, but I think it turned out okay. It's not the greatest nose, but it definitely is a nose. You can tell it's a nose. I did the ridges on the nose. I filled in pretty much the rest of the skull's face. And then we move on to the teethies, and they're a sickly yellow now, but I'm going to brighten those up because salt water tends to bleach bones and stuff like that. So that's why the skull is so light, is because that's what salt water does to bones. It bleaches bones. And he lives in salt water. He doesn't live in fresh water. He's not a pond-dwelling turtle. He's a hawkbill turtle, and those guys live in the ocean. So I went ahead and blotted out the teeth and made sure that they were nice and sharp and nice and good, and then I moved back to the nose. And after I moved to the nose, I'm going to move off somewhere else, then move back to the nose again. I just really couldn't get the shading on the tip very well. I know that there's supposed to be like light residual shading off to the edge, but I couldn't really figure out how I wanted to go ahead and do that. And I go ahead and fix over his arm where the shell was and move over to his tail. And then I, select just the tail so I don't have to worry about ruining all the work on my teeth, and make sure I get the teeth shadows all nice and right. You can kind of see on the front 3 teeth that I put a couple shadows there to just make the tail look a little bit more there as opposed to just sitting inside of something. And over with the legs, oh god, I go over these legs so many frickin' times. I just couldn't figure out how I wanted the colors to go. I couldn't figure out how I wanted the muscles to shine. I couldn't do that very well with the shell casting shadow on it, and I didn't know how to put the shadow in there, so I kind of just didn't. Moving on to his arm, I think I did a pretty okay job on his arm, not anything wild and crazy. I did put in the reflect lighting on the bottom side way later than I should have, but I'm just doing base shading, base colors, trying to get everything down so I could refine it a little bit later. Onto the shell, I'm not very happy with how those look. It looks very flat. It looks too square. I needed to curve it a little more, but I couldn't figure out how to do that. going on to his head. We got the shadows going on with the overlap of the bill and moving on to his little tube worms he got coming out of his shoulders. I kind of like the colors, and I really dig the blending I did with this. They look really good, and I love the little squirmy wiggly doos that are coming out of there. I think it's very cute. I like his little wormy dealies. And here, it's really hard to see anything that I'm doing because I just did not pick a good color palette for this. That's something that I'm going to be working on and hopefully getting better with so I can, actually make progress with doing these things. I wanted his eye to be a little glowy, so I went and blended in around there, moved to his nose, and then we're going to move back over to his eye again, and then move back over to the harpoon, because I totally forgot about the harpoon that I had sticking out of the eyeball. I decided to completely redo the harpoon because I did not like the shape that it was, and yeah, I had to redraw it and recolor, and I think I did a pretty good job with the base colors and the shading and all that sort of fun stuff. It looks like a real harpoon. It looks good. I'm very proud of this harpoon. I think it's better out of the two harpoons that I do. It's definitely the better one. And it has some overlap going in there, and it has some depth, and it's just a really nice looking harpoon, man. I don't know what to tell you. I'm probably going to try to find different brushes to use with some of these things because I think part of the problem is I just didn't have the brush blending as much as I needed it to. So I need to go and adjust some settings on there. So we move back to the face, try to give it some more detail, back to the arm, try to give it some more detail, give him a little bit of shine, maybe because he's supposed to be a little wet. I really bounce over a lot. I don't stay on one task for very long, but I screwed around with the harpoon here for quite a while. Well, not quite a while. It's probably about like 10 minutes it took me to do. I'm really good at doing the details on wood and making it look real, and so I'm pretty proud of how that all turned out. It looks like wood. I mean, it's wood. It's not super hard to do. You just have to get some light tones in there, some dark tones in there, and blend it a little bit. Make sure you still have your sharp lines because wood isn't 100% blended. And then I move over to his other tube worm. I got to make sure that I get everything I need to be colored. And I really like the light pink that I used for it. I think it makes it pop out a little bit more from his head, and the horns that are coming out and pretty much taking up the majority of the canvas. And yeah, I go through some touching up some details, add in that little bit of lighting, go back to the legs again because I just am not happy with them. I don't know how to fix them. And realize that I had forgotten to do the notches on that side of the head. So I go back to that horn and do some notches, add in some brighter colors. I figured out far too late that I am allowed to use brighter colors for things. It's allowed and it's supposed to be used. And then I also forgot the spikes on the tail, so I went ahead and made those spikes. They look pretty fucking good, in my opinion. They're little spiky doos, and they have decent shading, and they're not like a main point, so I didn't work too hard on them. Moving on to the other harpoon. This one I kind of struggled with a little bit. I don't know why. I just couldn't get it to look like the other one, as good as the other one. And I ended up getting rid of all the stuff outside down there just because it didn't look very good. I don't know how to do rope very well, and I sure as hell can't render rope, so I'm not gonna do that. I'm already done with this thing. Like, I was struggling. I was on the struggle bus for this guy. And then I decided to give this guy a background just because I didn't give Venusaur much of a background besides gradient, and that was because I spent so much time on everything already, and I just didn't feel like doing that. But I think backgrounds really help make things look nicer and come together. Not super happy with the color palette that I chose for the sky. It's just not that great, but as a whole, I think I did a pretty damn good job, and you'll be damned if you think otherwise. Thanks for watching. Like, comment, subscribe.